The first time I met Karen Ellsworth, she didn't knock. She invaded, marching across my front lawn like a one-woman HOA SWAT team, clipboard tucked under one arm and judgment under the other. I was unloading the last of my boxes, sweat-streaked, boots caked in red dust from the back roads. Brutus, my old German shepherd and retired canine partner, lounged under the porch, eyeing her like he could smell trouble a mile off. "You can't park that here," she snapped, jabbing a manicured finger toward my '72 Bronco. I looked up. "Afternoon. To you too." She ignored the greeting. "This is a deed-restricted community. That thing is loud, it leaks oil, and it doesn't match the neighborhood aesthetic." I set the box down carefully. "It's a restored classic. Compliant with emissions, insured, and legally parked in my driveway. Got a problem with the DMV, take it up with them." She pursed her lips like she'd bitten into a lemon. "You must be the new owner. Jacob Callahan?" "That's right. I'm Karen Ellsworth, president of the Homeowners Association. We maintain high standards here. We expect homeowners to respect the guidelines that protect property values and community integrity." "Appreciate the warm welcome," I said, brushing dust off my jeans. "But I've read the rule book. Everything I've done so far is by the book. Fence is permitted, mailbox is standard, driveway's gravel, not asphalt, but within the variance for lots over a quarter acre." Her eyes narrowed. "We don't tolerate confrontational attitudes." "I'm not being confrontational, just thorough." She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the citrus cleaner on her blazer. "Listen closely, Mr. Callahan. This community doesn't run on loopholes and technicalities. It runs on cooperation, harmony. I won't let one man drag us into chaos because he thinks the rules don't apply to him." Brutus let out a low growl. Karen stiffened, taking a half step back. "He's trained," I said calmly. "Won't bite unless commanded." "You'll need to leash him," she snapped. "Even on your property." "Not required by law," I replied. She looked at her watch. "You have 1 hour to vacate until your violations are reviewed by the compliance committee. I've already notified law enforcement." My jaw tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Law enforcement?" "That's right. We've had success in the past resolving issues through external pressure." I tilted my head. "You sure you want to go that route?" She gave a smug little shrug. "People tend to fall in line once the badge shows up. It's nothing personal." I smiled. "No, I suppose it isn't." With that, she turned on her heel and marched back across the lawn, heels clicking like war drums on concrete. I watched her retreat without another word, but inside, something coiled tight in my chest. She didn't know. She didn't know who I was. I wasn't just Jacob Callahan, new guy with a dog and a dusty truck. I was Sheriff Callahan, elected, sworn, and serving this county for 7 straight years. I'd cleaned up meth dens, chased fugitives into the hills, negotiated hostage crises, and I'd done it without blinking. Yet somehow this woman thought she could rattle me with petty fines and passive-aggressive threats. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. I leaned against the Bronco, arms folded, and looked out over the rows of cookie-cutter homes lining the street. Manicured lawns, 2-car garages, and a whole lot of quiet desperation hiding behind blinds. This place might have looked picture-perfect on the surface, but it was clear who held the leash, and it wasn't the residents. It was Karen. And if her idea of law enforcement was a couple of scared rookies from my own department, she was in for one hell of a surprise. Brutus let out a soft huff and stretched. "Yeah, boy," I muttered, rubbing behind his ear. "Looks like we're gonna be busy." I glanced at the clock on my phone. 58 minutes left, according to Karen's ultimatum. Good. Let her send them. Let her call the cops. She had no idea the sheriff already lived here. Exactly 58 minutes after Karen's threat, I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. 2 squad cars. both marked, both mine. I leaned on the porch rail, coffee in one hand. Brutus sprawled beside me like a sentinel in fur. Deputy Thomas stepped out of the lead car. Young, eager, fresh out of the academy and still trying to grow a mustache. Behind him, Sergeant Patel unfolded herself from the second cruiser. Sharp-eyed and seasoned, the kind who read a room in half a glance. They approached cautiously, eyes flicking between me and the house like they were responding to a standoff. I took a slow sip. "Mornin', folks," Patel squinted. "Sheriff Callahan?" "In the flesh." Thomas glanced at the clipboard in his hand like it had betrayed him. "We got a complaint from the HOA president." "I bet you did. She said you're trespassing." I raised a brow. "On my own land?" "She says the sale is under investigation by the HOA board. Something about improper disclosures. She claims that grants them authority to issue a temporary eviction. She cite the statute?" I asked. He blinked. There isn't one," Patel cut in. "Sheriff, you want us to ask her to cool it?" I smiled, stepping off the porch. "No, let's play this through." Karen appeared right on cue. Arms crossed, lips twisted in satisfaction. She approached like someone who'd just dropped a royal flush. "Well, do your job," she ordered. "Remove him. I don't care what uniform he's wearing." Patel raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, we've confirmed he is the legal property owner. This isn't a police matter." Karen scowled. "He hasn't followed a single compliance regulation. He parks a rust bucket in plain view. His dog is aggressive, and that fence is 1 inch over height." "The fence is within variance," I said coolly. "And Brutus hasn't left the porch." Karen's voice pitched higher. "I told you, this community has standards. We voted. We want him out." Thomas cleared his throat. "Ma'am, an HOA vote doesn't override property law." Karen turned on me, eyes blazing. "You think this is over? I don't care who you are. Sheriff or not, the board can pursue legal action. We can file liens, assess fines, revoke amenities." "You mean the pool pass?" I asked. "Not too worried." "You're mocking us." "I'm just not scared of bullies." She stepped closer, face flushed. "You don't belong here. This community is built on order, not backwoods vigilantes playing cowboy." That one hit a nerve, not because it was insulting, but because it was revealing. Karen didn't want order. She wanted control, and I'd just walked in and threatened her little empire by refusing to kneel. I looked past her, down the street. Lawn chairs rustled behind. Windows. A garage door cracked open an inch. Curtains stirred. They were watching. I raised my voice slightly. "Tell me something, Karen. How many people here actually voted for you?" She stiffened. "Elections are confidential." "That's a dodge. I won with a clear majority," she snapped. "How many ballots were counted?" she faltered. Patel stepped in. "Sheriff, is this going somewhere?" I nodded. "It's going exactly where it needs to." I turned back to Karen. "I'll be filing a formal request for the HOA's financial and election records. As a resident and taxpayer, I'm entitled. And as sheriff, I'll be bringing the county inspector to verify every enforcement action you've ever issued." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Her skin turned pale beneath the makeup. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. "You threatened. A law enforcement officer. Filed a false police report. Issued an illegal eviction notice. Should I go on?" "You'll regret this." I leaned in, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You picked the wrong guy to make an example of. I follow the law. I am the law in this county. But if you keep pushing, I'll uncover every dark corner of your little fiefdom." She backed up a step, chest rising fast. Then she turned and stormed off, her heels digging trenches into the manicured lawn. Patel let out a low whistle. That went smoother than I expected. I exhaled. It's not over. She won't go down quietly. Thomas glanced around nervously. Should we be worried? I looked at Brutus, then at the watching windows. Only if we do nothing. Karen didn't back off. She got worse. Within 3 days, I had 6 violations tacked to my mailbox, 1 anonymous complaint about unpermitted police dogs, and a certified HOA letter demanding I repaint my house because the earth tone didn't match community warmth standards. I'd barely finished hanging my uniforms in the closet before I realized Karen wasn't playing by the rules. She was weaponizing them, but I wasn't some hapless newcomer trying to settle in. I was a career lawman with time, patience, and access. And I'd played this game before, just never in a cul-de-sac with roses on every porch and passive-aggressive signs about trash bin placement. It was time to flip the script. I started with a public records request. HOAs, despite their inflated egos, are required to maintain transparency, especially when dealing with elected leadership, finances, and punitive actions. I walked into the county clerk's office in uniform, signed the paperwork, and walked out with a flash drive that weighed more than gold. Back home, I loaded it, hundreds of PDFs, meeting notes, ledgers, email threads, every fine, citation, and violation from the past 5 years. I spent hours digging, and what I found was damning. Karen had been president for 6 years, 3 more than the term limit allowed by the bylaws. Elections were scheduled, but no ballots were counted. No meetings recorded. No minutes signed. Just majority decisions that always leaned in her favor. Worse, she was funneling HOA funds into a landscaping company she owned through her nephew. No bids, no competition. And the invoices were bloated. Triple market rate. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was fraud. I sat back, heart pounding, not from rage, but from clarity. This wasn't just about me. This was a pattern. Karen ruled by fear, fines, threats, silence. Anyone who pushed back found themselves buried under citations and legalese until they gave up, moved out, or paid her off, and now she thought she could intimidate a sheriff. Next morning, I made a few quiet calls, not to my department, but to folks who'd tangled with her before. Retired schoolteacher, divorced mother of 2, a veteran who'd had a flagpole forcibly removed from his yard. Each one told the same story. We complained. She buried us in fees. She threatened to sue. I had to sell. It wasn't worth the fight. I asked if they'd speak on the record. Most were hesitant, but 3 agreed. That was enough. I printed the reports, clipped the receipts, labeled everything. Then I typed up a letter, notarized it, and sent it to the HOA board. Copy to every single household in the community. A formal complaint. Requesting a vote to suspend Karen pending investigation into bylaw violations, election fraud, and financial misconduct, delivered by certified mail. No more secrets. No more fear. By that evening, the street was buzzing. Neighbors passed slower in their golf carts. Kids paused mid-game to whisper. Lawnmowers idled as eyes followed me on my evening walk with Brutus. Karen didn't come out. Not at first, but by Friday the pressure got to her. She held an emergency board meeting in the clubhouse. No notice, no agenda, just a hastily printed flyer taped to a stop sign. I went, of course. In uniform. The room was packed. Every chair full, backs pressed to walls. The air was humid with anticipation and resentment. Karen stood at the front, clutching a stack of papers, voice trembling beneath the surface calm. "These accusations," she began, "are baseless. They come from a man who clearly has a vendetta against this community." I raised a hand. "May I respond?" She froze. It was her meeting, but I had the badge. She nodded stiffly. I stood. "I didn't accuse. I documented. Your terms exceeded legal limits. Your finances don't reconcile. Your business dealings violate state nonprofit regulations. I turned to the room. This isn't about me. It's about how power was used against all of you. A murmur rose, low, angry, familiar. The kind of sound I'd heard in town halls right before a vote flipped or a mayor resigned. Karen's eyes darted. She could feel it. The tide had shifted. I leaned forward. We're calling for a vote. Tonight. Her voice cracked. You can't just... Yes, someone said behind me. We can. It was Mr. Henderson. Veteran, widower, ex-Marine. His voice cut through like a blade. I second the motion, said Patel, stepping in from the back. Karen turned pale. For the first time, she wasn't in control. The vote took 12 minutes. 3 hands went up immediately, then 5, then 10. And once the tipping point broke, it was a flood. Even the fence-sitters, the ones who had mowed Karen's lawn to avoid trouble, the ones who nodded and smiled to keep her at bay, raised their hands. By the end, only 2 people stood with her. One was her husband. The other looked like she regretted it halfway through the motion. Karen didn't speak, didn't scream. She just stood there, rooted to the clubhouse floor as the reality settled in like cold fog. Suspended, pending full investigation. No more unilateral decisions, no more threats. The board secretary read the motion aloud for the record. Karen's name trembled on the paper. It was the first time her authority had ever been publicly stripped. When the meeting ended, I waited. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply walked past her and said, "Your reign's over, Karen." She didn't reply. She just stared at the document still clutched in her hand like a life raft that had stopped floating. By Monday morning, her name was scrubbed from the HOA website. An interim committee formed, half of them people she'd tried to silence. I offered my assistance only where legally appropriate. I didn't need power. I had my badge. What I wanted was peace, and for the first time since I'd moved in, I felt it. Neighbors waved without fear in their eyes. A kid tossed a ball to Brutus while I watered the front hedges. The couple across the street stopped by with fresh banana bread and said, "We're glad you're here." So was I. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen had tried to make me feel like the outsider. But in fighting her off, I'd found community. Real community. One that stood up when it mattered. 2 weeks later, Karen's resignation letter arrived, in everyone's mailbox. No apology. Just a sterile line. For personal reasons, I will be stepping away from HOA duties indefinitely. But it didn't matter. Her grip was broken, and people started living again. Flags went up. Kids played louder. Yards bloomed in colors she never would have approved. Even the old veteran who'd kept his porch light off for 3 years hosted a barbecue. As for me, I put up my hammock, and that rust bucket truck Karen hated, I parked it sideways in the driveway, washed it spotless, and let Brutus ride shotgun down to the feed store every Saturday. Still, I kept my eyes open. You don't do this job for 2 decades and assume the storm's truly past. Power doesn't... It regroups, but Karen never tried again. Word was she'd left town. Moved to a retirement village with no HOA. Fitting, really. No one left to boss around except the squirrels. Late one evening, Sergeant Patel stopped by. She leaned against my porch post, sipping iced tea, watching the sun settle over the quiet, rebalanced neighborhood. "You know," she said, "this could have gone another way." "Oh, I know. You didn't have to dig. Most folks would have just moved." "I didn't move here to be pushed out." She nodded. "You've got a spine, Sheriff. This place needed that. I didn't do it alone." She smirked. "No, but you reminded them they could stand." We sat in silence a while longer as Brutus chased fireflies across the yard. Then she added, "Think she'll ever come back?" "If she does, I said. She'll find the welcome sign changed. What's it say now? I raised my glass. Welcome to Maple Hollow. Sheriff on duty. Karen free zone. We laughed, deep and unburdened. That night, I finally slept with the windows open. No noise, no threats, just crickets and breeze. The town was still small, still had its quirks, but it was mine now. Not because I'd enforced the law, but because I'd reminded people they didn't have to be afraid of bullies in khakis and clipboards. Because justice doesn't always wear a robe or ride a siren. Sometimes it shows up, in a pickup truck with muddy boots and a dog named Brutus, and it stays.